Do you know what Alexander the Great's greatest conquest was? Pause the video here if you want to make a guess. It wasn't Persia or India or Egypt. Those are all pretty well known. It wasn't even the numerous other kingdoms and city-states he conquered across the Mediterranean. Some of those were pretty important too. His greatest conquest was actually something totally different, something much stranger. Somewhere around here, somewhere in the deserts of northern Africa, deep in the mountains of Central Asia, or maybe up in the frozen wastes of Scandinavia, an Iron Age tribe is celebrating. Their chief has just returned from a long journey, a journey which took him over great mountain ranges, through forests full of monsters and across wide open plains patrolled by fierce horsemen. He'd traveled further than anyone in his tribe had ever gone before. He'd braved untold hardships and defeated fierce warriors. And now he could finally bring home the treasure he'd come for, the treasure which would make him the most powerful chief in the whole damn world. For this is the story of how an Iron Age tribe got their hands on an awesome new metal. Not gold, silver, or even bronze. No, they got their hands on iron, no man. This is a pretty big deal because it turns out iron was invented in this part of the world sometime around the year 900 BC. That means everyone who lived there basically had access to the same technology. No one really had an unfair advantage. Sure, some people might have been better at using it or had more of it, but really everyone had access to the tech. So if that's the case, why does one group of these tribes become way more powerful than all the others? Why do these guys go from living in some random-ass village to becoming the most powerful empire in human history? Well, that's easy, because they get their hands on one very special piece of tech. You see, about 100 years after iron was invented in the region, someone discovered that you could mix iron with carbon in controlled amounts. This created a new type of iron, tougher, sharper, and more durable than regular iron. Now, if you know anything about history, you probably already know where this is going. This new material was steel. So we've got to give a huge shout out to whoever discovered steel first, because let's be real. Without steel, none of this happens. Without steel, you can't build the weapons and armor needed to conquer the world. You also can't build giant rolling war machines made of sharpened logs and spikes, nor can you build chariots to ride in them. Plus, it's hard to imagine how the world's greatest siege engines would function without steel parts. In fact, it's impossible to imagine how any of this would happen without steel. But anyway, this is pretty significant. Steel gave this one tribe a massive edge against everyone else in the region. It allowed them to create the best weapons, the best armor, and the best war machines. So naturally, they went on to become the most powerful force in the region. They went on to conquer everyone who didn't have access to steel. They became so powerful, in fact, that we still talk about them today. This is the story of how the Scythians became the most powerful empire in the ancient world. Wait a minute. Wrong Scythians. Sorry, wrong history. Okay, this isn't right. Hold on, okay. Yes, this definitely seems right. Okay. Perfect. Yes, 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 this is exactly right. See, this was the problem facing one of history's greatest conquerors. He needed to find a way to make his army unstoppable. But how could he do that when everyone else had the exact same access to technology? He couldn't make his soldiers stronger or tougher. He couldn't create new weapons or armor. He couldn't do any of that because everyone else would have the same access to the tech. Note, to win, he needed to find a weakness in his enemies. He needed to find some small advantage, some minor flaw that he could exploit to get the upper hand. And then he found it. You see, while everyone in the region had access to iron, not everyone knew how to use it properly. You see, it turns out iron is really hard to work with. It's brittle and unforgiving. If you mess up, it's not like you can just hammer out a new piece. You can't recycle it or reuse it. If you mess up once, it's ruined forever. To solve this problem, neighboring tribes developed unique expertise in certain areas. One tribe might be really good at making tools, but they wouldn't necessarily be good at making weapons. Another tribe might be really good at making horseshoes, but not so much plows. These differences weren't big, but they were important. They gave each tribe a small edge against the others, a small advantage that could mean the difference between life and death. And this is where our boy comes in. When he took power, he noticed this disparity in skill. He saw how each tribe specialized in different areas, and he thought to himself, maybe I can take advantage of that. Maybe I can exploit these weaknesses and get the upper hand. So he began sending ambassadors to each tribe asking for whatever specialty item they were known for. He wanted to give his army the edge they needed to win battles. And it worked. Thanks to this strategy, his army was the strongest in the region. His generals could outmaneuver and outfight anyone, and his empire grew larger than any empire before it. See, by exploiting the weaknesses of his enemies, he became the most powerful man in the ancient world. By playing into the flaws of his opponents, he became invincible. And this is how Alexander the Great became the most powerful man in the ancient world. Pause the video here if you want to make a guess. Who was his greatest conquest again? Was it Persia or India or Egypt? Those are all pretty well known. Was it even one of the other kingdoms and city-states he conquered across the Mediterranean? Some of those were pretty important too. It was none of those things. His greatest conquest was actually something totally different, something much stranger. See, by exploiting the weaknesses of his enemies, he became the most powerful man in the ancient world. Great job, Alex. Good show. Except, and this is kind of embarrassing, but he never actually won a battle against a technically superior opponent. All of Alexander's victories came against militarily inferior opponents. Every single time he faced an enemy with a technically superior military, he lost. At the Battle of the River Granicus, his army lost hundreds of men to just a few dozen Persian immortals. At the Battle of Issus, he barely managed to defeat Darius III, despite having 20 times as many men. And at the Battle of Gaugamela, he only won thanks to some last-minute trickery. You see, despite being known as the greatest military strategist in the ancient world, Alexander the Great was actually pretty bad at fighting wars. In fact, he wasn't even very good at winning battles. Most of his victories were either against militarily inferior opponents or opponents who literally ran away from him. So yeah, his greatest military victory was actually a bit of a fluke. The secret to his success was actually his ability to find the weaknesses in his opponents. You see, Alexander the Great was actually the master of exploiting weaknesses, not actual military prowess, as you'll see next time when we talk about his greatest conquest. Subscribe to the Sleepy Philosopher for more history. Softly told.